Bar, aka Beyond All Reason, aka one of the best RTS games out right now, is receiving updates upon updates as it heads towards its full release. And there's been some news on that front that came in as I was writing this video, and it's big, because Bar has gone professional. Now I won't get into crazy detail here, as the blog post about it is quite large, so go read that for yourself if you want to know everything. But here's the cliff notes and what this means for the game. So Bar has teamed up with Hooded Horse, a very well-known publisher in the indie games space, who's worked with other games like Dinolords, Empires of the Undergrowth, and many, many more. So to me, this seems like a great pairing. Now, bringing in a publisher to Bar is quite a drastic shift from how it's been developed over all these years. Because if you didn't know, Bar has always been a volunteer project, with its only way of raising funds being through community support. Now the game can get some real momentum and hopefully release on Steam much sooner than it would have otherwise. Which gets me on to probably the biggest bombshell here, because when Bar does release on Steam, it will be paid, whereas previously it was going to be free. It will continue to have the free version available on its website, and both of these versions will be compatible with each other, so players aren't going to be segmented in any way. The Steam version will also come with extra single-player content that the free version will not include. Now I know some people out there will not be fans of the game taking a publishing deal, but I think they've handled things in a pretty exceptional way. Again, there's a lot of detail you can read about this whole thing on their blog post if you're interested, but personally I can't wait to see what the team has in store for Bar going forward with this new strategy. Tempest Rising has been getting updates quite frequently since its release last year, and just recently we've received word on what we've all been waiting for, the mythical DLC that brings the third faction to the game in both campaign and skirmish. The Veti have appeared briefly a couple of times in the form of multiplayer and skirmish betas, but this news brings both a playable campaign demo with the first two missions, and an expected release date of later this year. And like in earlier betas, you can play multiplayer and skirmish as any of the three factions as well. Also, the demo is an entirely separate download, so you don't even need to own the base game to give this a try. The first two missions of the other factions' campaigns are there for good measure as well, so it's a pretty expansive demo. Some of the information released alongside this is quite interesting too. The DLC itself will be called the Veti's Wrath and feature 11 campaign missions that presumably will continue the story from the two existing campaigns. It will be a paid DLC, but the faction will be able to be played by anyone for free in skirmish, multiplayer, and custom games without needing to buy it, which is great to hear. I'm not sure if the demo will still be available by the time this video goes live, but check the link in the description if you're interested. Otherwise, keep your ear out for a full release later this year. This video is sponsored by Warhammer 40,000 Tacticus, a turn-based strategy game that you can take on the go that delivers exciting PvE campaigns, challenging PvP encounters, group raids, and more. Tacticus features over 120 Warhammer 40,000 champions from 22 unique factions, with the latter ranging from Warhammer staples like the Ultramarines to more niche ones like the Thousand Sons and Black Templars. And there's also a bunch of others who are not part of the Space Marine factions, like the Tyranids, Orcs, Chaos, and many, many more. I'd go with Tau personally, but hey, that's just me. Tacticus gameplay revolves around tight, hex grid turn-based strategy games, where your chosen squad's position, timing, and synergies matter every single turn. It's not just about who deploys the highest power unit, decisions actually matter. As I mentioned earlier, there is a range of game modes, so whether you prefer PvP, PvE, as I do, or some kind of mix of the two, there is something for you here. And with fresh content, new features, new game modes, and regular updates and events coming all the time, there is always something new to experience with Tacticus. Speaking of, this month Tacticus is celebrating its 4-year anniversary, with a major new addition in the epic Crusade mode, where you and masses of other players can face off as part of opposing sides on a galactic scale, as well as bringing a bunch of new champions. So if you're interested, download Tacticus for free using my link in the description or pinned comment, or just scan this QR code on screen now. And be sure to use my code to get exclusive rewards to help you get started. Thanks again to Warhammer 40,000 Tacticus for sponsoring this video. Age of Empires has been trucking along as we've been made accustomed to over the past couple of years. Age 4 has been getting its share of DLC expansions, which is awesome to see. Though overall, they haven't been as well received as the DLCs for Age of Empires 2 or Asian Mythology Retold. It does have one new one coming in Raiders of the North, so hopefully it knocks it out of the park when it releases later this year. I'm glad it's been able to maintain and even slightly increase its solid player base over the years, alongside its older sibling in Age 2 Definitive, which continues to succeed in a big way, with both regular DLC expansions as well as dedicated single-player ones in the Chronicles series. It's obviously not going anywhere, and Microsoft would be silly to not continue with how things are going, as somehow Age 2 continues to grow its player numbers, despite being something we've all been playing for nearly 30 years now. By the way, those Chronicles expansions are actually really great. So much so that I'm actually currently working on a documentary about their creation with the team from Capture Age. So if you're interested in hearing about that, subscribe to watch it when it comes out later this year. It's a really interesting story, and it's one that you won't want to miss. Like AoE, Asian Mythology is also doing quite well, with updates and expansions still coming through after it launched back in 2024. And they've all been received quite well on Steam, pulling very positive reviews and giving the player base a shot in the arm every 6 months or so. Though I believe the most recent one was the last of their planned expansion pass, so I'll be interested to see how they intend on supporting the game further in the coming months and years. The player numbers have been pretty consistent throughout 2026, though recently they have just slowly began to fall off a little bit, so hopefully that can either stabilize or, in a perfect world, pick up a wee bit. But still, it's clear that it has its dedicated group of fans, and while it's nowhere near its historical brethren, it has well surpassed Age of Mythology Extended Edition, and in my mind has justified its existence enough to maybe get a proper sequel. Any takers, Microsoft? Relic has stuck with Company of Heroes 3, and props to them for doing so. Updates continue to roll out frequently, with major ones coming every couple of months. They've also made quite a few expansion packs since launch, bringing new factions and units into the game. The most recent was Dare and Destroy, which brought 4 new battle groups to the game, including some particularly cool ones, like the Free French Forces, say that 3 times, and the Wehrmacht Siegebreakers. Unfortunately, most of the DLCs aren't being as well received in general as I'm sure Relic would like, though I guess it's a positive that the negative reviews are usually criticising the price instead of the content itself, so if you get them on sale, then you should be in for a good time. Company of Heroes 3 still hasn't convincingly dethroned its predecessor in Company of Heroes 2, but it has ever so slowly been bleeding players over the past year, and it looks like those players are hopefully going to COH 3, if the Steam numbers are anything to go by. And just recently, they've actually been doing pretty positively. So, if Relic can keep things going and improve things here, I do genuinely think Company of Heroes 3's best days are still to come. Though the release of Final Stand hasn't given me a bunch of confidence, you can watch my full video if you're interested, but long story short, while it's fun, it's quite shallow in terms of its gameplay, and at a $30 asking price, it is very poor value right now. Stormgate, at this point, I think is dead and buried, which is very unfortunate. It's not entirely unforeseen, but it is still unfortunate. Aside from the fact that there is almost literally no one playing it, the last Steam Dev update was back in May, and that was saying multiplayer and co-op were going offline because of the loss of their infrastructure provider. And even though that this is hoped to be temporary, the work required to fix it takes time and money, and I don't know if either is in much abundance right now over at Frost Giant Studios. I am wishing everyone who works there the best. I imagine it's not a very fun place to be right now. Sins of a Solar Empire 2 has been chugging along nicely, with quite a few significant updates being delivered throughout the year, as well as a few smaller DLC packs in 2025 that met a mixed reception. Sins 2's bigger updates have been looking good though. There was a big UI overhaul a few months back, the pirate faction has been expanded, and there's a massive AI overhaul coming alongside the next big DLC. And literally as I was writing this, Stardock and Ironclad officially announced the first of their big upcoming expansions, that being the elusive 4th faction that's been hinted at literally since the first game, almost 20 years ago. It's releasing a few days into September, and I'm hoping to have a review out around that time to let you guys know how it fares. I'm very excited to get my hands on this because, as I said, it's been 20 years coming, so fingers crossed that it delivers. No word yet on when the campaign DLC will release, but I'm guessing maybe halfway through next year, considering the release cadence of their other DLCs. Anno 117 came out earlier this year and launched pretty positively, but over the last wee while has, on Steam at least, fallen to mixed reviews, mostly because of Ubisoft Connect's always online requirement and the requirement to have to use Ubisoft Connect by itself. Which is a shame, because I really liked 1.17 and I really hope it does succeed. There's good history with Ubisoft supporting this series, as made obvious by the number of DLCs and updates that Anno 1800 got, so hopefully they can do the same here. The Scouring is the Warcraft-inspired RTS that I've covered a few times here, and it too has been receiving a healthy number of updates in 2026, with numerous game-changing additions including air units, casual and ranked PvP, major balance updates, other fresh units, and more. The most exciting thing to me though is the addition of naval warfare. Let's freaking go, man. I'm looking forward to revisiting the Scouring in the future once it gets a bit further on. My primary complaint with it back when I covered it was its lack of content, so I'm really stoked to see that Orc Group has been addressing that concern head on. Godsworn is another Warcraft-inspired RTS game with a unique, fantastical setting based around the very real ancient history of the Baltics. It's still in early access, but in theory it shouldn't be too far away from a full release. In fact, in a recent update last month, developers have said that they're currently aiming for the first half of 2027. I'm hoping closer to January than June, but of course I'm more than happy to wait for them to get the game to a point that they are satisfied with. I really enjoyed Godsworn when I played it a couple of years back, and it has been receiving lots of meaningful updates since then, so I'm quite excited to get back into it once it hits 1.0. Era 1 released into Steam Early Access just over a year ago, and it has been receiving very positive reviews so far. Made by Team Complex, the group behind the massively popular Complex mod for Homeworld, Era 1 promises to deliver space strategy gameplay where you can build bases and warships from scratch. I haven't got around to playing this one yet, but as I said, feedback's been pretty darn good, so I'm excited to give it a try once it hits 1.0, which according to the developers should be in about, well, I'm not sure. The Steam page lists July 2026, which I'll have you know is last month, and I can't find any official word on an updated timeframe. The game is still getting updates though, so I mean hopefully we'll hear soon enough. Dying Breed is a very Command & Conquer-esque RTS game that launched into Steam Early Access earlier this year. And like some others on this list, it is being published by Microprose. And when I say CNC inspired here, I mean it. There's FMV cutscenes, the art style looks like it was ripped right from Westwood servers, and the electro metal soundtrack is about as CNC as you can get. You really couldn't get any more Westwood if you tried. All going well, Dying Breed is scheduled to hit 1.0 later this year. It's scheduled for October, but obviously a lot of early access games do miss their originally scheduled release dates, so I'm hoping that this one may buck that trend. Stronghold Crusader Definitive finished its post-launch roadmap at the start of this year, and thanks to its success, to my surprise, Firefly committed to further expanding the game with 2 more DLCs and accompanying free updates in 2026, both of which have now released and been received pretty well. For the asking price of $5 per DLC, it is very hard to go wrong here, and props to Firefly for sticking with Crusader Definitive. Relic could definitely learn a thing or two about their pricing. Player-wise, it's been pretty consistent since it stabilised around December of last year, while surpassing the older Crusader HD in terms of regular concurrent players. It'll be interesting to see what happens here once Stronghold 4 is out, which we'll get to soon. ZeroSpace is a pretty interesting looking sci-fi RTS that aims to combine a StarCraft 2 style of gameplay with RPG elements from games like Mass Effect and Baldur's Gate. Their words, not mine. After being announced a couple of years back, it released into early access last month, and while the community feedback hasn't been universally positive, with a lot of criticism levelled at a lack of quality of life features and unrefined systems, overall it seems people are pretty happy with it as an early access product with room to grow. I mean, hell, this guy here has 70 hours in it, and he says, and I quote, "best RTS ever." So hey, there must be something here. ZeroSpace stands out from a lot of other indie RTS games in that it seems very high budget, with animated cutscenes, promises of multiple fleshed out game modes, a large range of factions and units, plus a deep cinematic campaign. If it can deliver on its promises, maybe this will be the spiritual successor to the Blizzard RTS games that Stormgate hoped to be. Stronghold 4 was announced a couple of months back, and it even came alongside a free demo for anyone to jump in and give a try. I managed to get some time with it early, and I was quite impressed, particularly with the art style and environment design. There were some issues I had with it, mostly with unit and building legibility, but overall it was a small demo, and it left me excited for the game's future. Subscribe if you want to hear my thoughts on the early access launch, which is happening sometime later this year. Another recent announcement that kind of surprised me was Company of Heroes Definitive Edition from Relic. Not because the original Company of Heroes isn't a good game or anything, it's incredible, in fact. But on the surface, it just doesn't really seem like a good candidate to get the remaster treatment, as both Company of Heroes 2 and 3 have surpassed it in basically every way. That leaves the campaigns, which I'll be honest, I don't remember much of anymore. Like, I remember the original being pretty good, but I don't think I got around to playing all the DLCs, and I don't remember people singing their praises night and day at the time. Though I guess I was like 12 at the time, so what do I know? From a recent article, it sounds like the game will be releasing sometime in September at a price of $30 US, which is a price point that Relic seems to think is very in vogue right now. So hey, keep an eye out on my channel for a review when it drops. Let me know in the comments if this is something you're particularly excited for. Maybe I'm off the mark. Time will tell, I guess. Okay boys, Sanctuary time. After years of waiting, I can now actually say that the Kickstarter for the spiritual successor to Supreme Commander is here. Actually, it's just ended. It wrapped up August 21st, but thankfully it crushed its funding goals, so keep your eyes out for more news as the early access launch nears next year. I'm pretty excited about Sanctuary, and I reckon you should be too. I made a full video on this, so go check that out if you're interested. The key information to know is that the early access release is hitting around a year from now, and that there's a free demo you can try right now to see what you think. Age of Respair is the Stronghold looking castle builder that I've covered recently, but there hasn't really been many updates on it since I last talked about it. I'll take that to mean that the creator is head down a dev town, so to speak, just making the game and will surface again when there's something to talk about. I guess that or the game's cancelled. I certainly hope for the former. Game of Thrones War for Westeros had some news just recently, after quite a long period of radio silence after its announcement. While it's nothing massive, Playside did give a bit of insight into how some of the gameplay mechanics will work, what units and heroes will be featured, and the kind of maps they're making. It's pretty vague, and it seems like standard RTS fare at this point, so I'm interested to get a more detailed look, hopefully sometime soon. It won't be as soon as we initially thought though, as alongside this news the game also received a delay into early 2027. He's hoping they can keep to that window as the months go by. Falling Frontier is another one of those games we've been watching for what feels like forever. It's a sci-fi strategy game that features an incredibly nice art style and more than a few exciting looking mechanics, like ship customization and intricate scouting and logistics systems. Falling Frontier is being published by Hooded Horse, though despite having publisher support, it doesn't receive the most frequent of updates. They seem to come around every year or so, with the most recent being March of this year. Unfortunately, the game has received many delays over the years, going from 2022 to 2023, then 2025, and now 2026. 4 months to go until that window closes. I'm hoping we'll get something this year, but I'll be honest, I'm not holding my breath. Whenever it does come though, I'll be here, because Falling Frontier looks awesome. Creative Assembly has 2 Total War games on the horizon right now, those being Total War Warhammer 40,000, which I'll henceforth be calling Total 40k, and Medieval 3. Both have yet to receive a release date, but my guess is around Q3 next year for Total 40k, considering how much of the game we've already seen, and that lines up nicely with Warhammer 40,000's 40th anniversary in 2027. For Medieval 3, oh man, I feel like that's at least 2028, probably 2029. It was purposely announced very early, and I don't even know if they'd started work on the game when they announced it. And CA is going to want to give Total 40k a really wide berth after its release to secure its foothold in the series. So don't hold your breath, Medieval 3 is nowhere close. But on Total 40k, it is looking good, but I'm not entirely convinced that a sci-fi Total War game is going to work. Maybe that's just me being conditioned from nearly 3 decades of historical and historical fantasy Total War games with a focus on melee combat. I'd say my main concern is a technical one. Like even just looking at their own gameplay footage, the frame rate is struggling quite often, and it makes me worried for those of us who don't have like monster gaming rigs. But hey, it's all pre-release, so let's judge it for real when it releases next year. Announced earlier this year, Dawn of War 4 is almost certainly the biggest RTS coming out in 2026. In a first for the series, it's not being developed by Relic, but this time by King Art Games, the team that made Iron Harvest back in 2020, which was a game that was mostly liked, but did have its issues. Dawn of War 4 brings 4 factions, the Space Marines, Orcs, Necrons, and Adeptus Mechanicus, alongside a full cinematic campaign which I am particularly excited about. We've had a decent look at gameplay, and I've even had the chance to play it myself, though that was very early on, so I'll withhold any opinions until I get my hands on a more finalised version of the game. It's scheduled to release in like a month's time, like September 18th, but I'm going to be honest, I think this one's getting a delay. I don't have any evidence for this, but it's just kind of giving that vibe, you know? Hey, I guess we'll just have to wait and see if the game releases in a month or gets a delay, and if it does, we'll probably be hearing about it very soon. Dinolords is a really cool looking RTS that I have covered a couple of times now, and basically mixes my two favourite things, dinosaurs and Stronghold. The developer is very onto it and publishes updates basically every month to keep people up to speed on how the game is going. And things are looking pretty good from where I'm sitting. I'm kind of hoping that I might have my hands on this within a few months, fingers crossed. And if you're interested, I would recommend checking out the blog posts on Steam, because they're pretty in-depth and Dinolords is looking pretty sick. It is definitely up there in my most anticipated RTS games right now. DORF is another one of these indie RTS games that the community has had their eyes on for a long time now, with an awesome art style that evokes classic RTS games and styles. It sounds like there's still a decent amount of work to go on DORF, but like Dinolords, there are frequent updates and blog posts detailing their progression on all the game's features. DORF did have a successful funding round on Kickstarter a few months back, raising a few $100,000, which is awesome to see. There's clearly a big audience for this kind of thing, if that wasn't kind of obvious from the views it pretty consistently brings on YouTube. Okay, Dustfront. I don't mean to repeat myself again here, but I will. Here's another game that we've all been watching for years at this point. But for what I think is the first time ever, Dustfront actually has a playable demo that, for now, you can still play. Community feedback was very positive on it, so things are looking good for Dustfront delivering on its promises of a gritty, uniquely styled RTS with both classic strategy gameplay and other genre infusions. As with many others, there is still no release date, but considering the demo fared well, I'm hopeful that some kind of release maybe won't be too far away. Empire Eternal is a game that popped up a few years ago from a solo developer as a spiritual successor to Empire Earth, but it reached a publishing deal with Microprose back in 2024 and started to pick up steam after that. Actually, it's also not even called that anymore, it's called Imperium Eternal for some reason. I don't really know why, I guess maybe it was a licensing thing, because Empire Eternal is a better name. Either way, there's no release date as of yet, and updates on its progress have been infrequent, but they are still coming. After the last one at the end of 2025, there was a new devlog just a couple of weeks ago, detailing the large-scale resource gathering system. Seeing a game like this be picked up by Microprose is pretty exciting, and I'm hoping that this publishing deal gave the developer the funds and resources required to deliver it in a manner and level of quality that just would not have been possible otherwise. I am definitely keeping my ear to the ground on this one. Thanks so much for watching. Let me know in the comments what your favourite upcoming RTS games are. I think if I had to choose, it's got to be Dinolords, right? I mean, like the dinosaurs and the Stronghold, I mean, it's perfect. Just perfection. But obviously there's also Dinolords 4, which I'm excited for. Game of Thrones War for Westeros is something I'm also pretty hyped for. Stronghold 4. Yeah, man, we're doing pretty good, aren't we? RTS is doing pretty good. Alright, thanks for watching. Support me on Patreon if you like what I do here and want to see more of it. Thanks to everyone who already does so. And I'll see you all in the next one, which is going to be soon, because August is a big month for me. You'll see why soon.